Hey, welcome back to The Current. I'm Pastor Chris Nafis of Living Water Church, and today we have an old friend with us, Laura Davis Mansfield, who was a part of our church for many years, from the very beginning on until she and her husband Monty left to be in officer training school in the Salvation Army. Laura has had a lot of ups and downs in her life, a constant overachiever. She went from having an Ivy League degree, being a sports star in high school and college, to the streets of San Diego, which is where we met her. This is a story of hardship, but also a story of redemption. Laura is very vulnerable with us in the story, so I want to thank her for being willing to share that hard part of her journey so that we can all be enlightened by some of the things that drive people into homelessness and to give us some hope that people can find their way out of it and into a life that is redeemed and that is full of help and service to others. So I hope you enjoyed Laura's story, and be warned, there's some hard stuff in there. So, if you're a sensitive listener, just kind of be on your guard. But here it is. Hi, Laura. Thank you so much for taking the time to come on here with me. We miss you at Living Water. How are you doing today?
Nice to see everyone. We're doing pretty good here in Rancho Palos Verdes, California.
Okay. How long have we known each other, Laura?
Since at least 2016. I know that for sure. When you planted the church in San Diego, we were doing it outside in the park.
Yeah.
That park was.
Fault Line Park. You were there in the Fault Line Park days. I thought, yeah. I knew you were there at least in the old building. I couldn't remember if you were there even before that. So that was like the very beginning of the church. And you were in and out of the church, mostly in for like a lot of years until you and Monty got married and you guys got into the Salvation Army program. And man, we miss you. It's a joy to see you. And we were talking a little before. I'm like, man, Laura just has this, you just have this like energy and this like joy that follows you everywhere. And yeah, it's just a blessing to have you around. And so thanks again for being here. So we're going to talk a little bit about your journey because, I'll let you tell most of the story, but you were someone that when we met you, you were on the street in San Diego, right? And struggling still with addiction and had a number of issues going on. But maybe could you tell, I don't even think a lot of Living Water folks know, could you tell us like a little bit about like your life before that? Like what led you, or how'd you end up on the streets of San Diego?
Yes, thanks, Pastor Chris. So I grew up in Pennsylvania, a little town called Drexel Hill, Pennsylvania, right outside of Philadelphia. And so my journey starts with a very dysfunctional family. My mother's mentally ill, and she has been in a mental institution since 1987. And so that was really hard on me as a kid. I lived with my father and stepmother. She was verbally abusive and emotionally abusive. I was subjected to sexual abuse when I was growing up too, a little girl at 7 years old. A lot went on, but I always had that smile on my face and I always had joy of the Lord. Jesus was always in my heart as a little girl. And really, I just loved the world, even though the world at times I felt didn't love me back. And so I went off and I got out of my father's and stepmother's house when I was 12 in 1987. And when child abuse was not talked about, and I just knew it would be better in foster care or on the streets. I was scared for my life. I thought my stepmother really was threatening to kill me. So I honestly was so scared. I didn't care where I was going. I just wasn't going home there. And luckily, through the grace of God, I was able to get out, live with my mother for a little bit. It was right before she got put into the mental institution for schizophrenia. And then, so I went to go live with aunts and uncles. So I have fabulous aunts and uncles that really took me in, kind of like that Disney princess, right? We're the prodigal niece, as they say in biblical terms. But really, my doctor aunt and her husband lived with their kids during the school year. all through high school. And my other aunt on my mother's side, Aunt Carol, lived with them in the summertime. So, and I had wonderful grandmothers. I was very close to my grandmother, Laura. She lived to 97 years old, and I loved her with my heart. And we had just a unique, wonderful, beautiful mother, daughter, grandmother relationship. She was really pivotal in showing me a role model, what a woman role model really was. And also my aunts were very pivotal in that. And then all my friends' parents, even at age 3, a woman named Andy Kimmons was best friend with Brent since 3 years old. She would watch me at the pool, and I'm still friends with her today. So it was really my friends all through high school and college that heard my story and saw my hope and my joy in the Lord, and I wasn't allowing anything to kind of defeat me. So I became an overachiever. I played sports. I was able to get onto the varsity starter when I was a sophomore in high school. I was part of the basketball team and field hockey, lacrosse, executive committee. I was all in journalism, brown and white newspaper, yearbook, and really kind of voted as most likely to succeed in life because I was very driven and motivated and worked very hard. I graduated from Upper Darby High School in the National Honor Society, which was very prestigious at my school. My graduating class was about 600 kids. So it was a pretty big school and they only chose like maybe 50 people to be in National Honor Society. So, and I was really good at playing lacrosse. That was like my true passion. And then I injured it.
Well, just I didn't know you played so much lacrosse, but I have to say, like, people who know you from Living Water days, like, none of this is really surprising. Like, you're such like you're involved in everything all the time, and you just do things well. And again, with that joy and that's like, oh yeah, that's who Laura is. So even with all of the baggage going on at home, like with your stepmom and your dad and all that, like even through that, you had this like warm support system through extended family and friends. But like, obviously a lot of like traumatizing stuff kind of under the surface, but then you're just like killing it in school and in sports and in all the other areas and just like involved in everything like that. I don't know. Somehow I'm like, yep, that's Laura. Anyway, sorry to mean to interrupt. Go on. So after school. Yeah.
And later in my story, when I became homeless, I became an overachiever in homelessness.
Yeah, for sure. That's what I'm saying. Like, I feel like even when you were on the street, you were doing that. Like, you were involved in everything. Like, you knew every organization. You were volunteering everywhere, including at our church. And I'm like, that's it.
Yeah, I am. But what happened though? My first challenge is I love lacrosse with all my heart. It kept me out of trouble. And then I tore my ACL, my knee, in a lacrosse game. And I actually had surgery on October 1st, 1992. And I was a senior in high school. And I went back. I actually injured it in my junior year in the spring. I went back for field hockey camp in the summer. And I couldn't move my knee. I kept going down the field. So I was devastated. I had knee surgery, ACL reconstructive knee surgery. With a meniscus tear. So basically I was out, I was out for my one passion was taken away from me, but did I let it get me down? No, I just got involved in something else. So, and I was also friends with the older kids. So when I got into my senior year, it was a little rough. I don't have lacrosse. And I'm being recruited for field hockey and lacrosse by Ivy League schools. And so luckily they could only give academic scholarships. They couldn't give out sports scholarships. So I was still able to keep my scholarship in college. But needless to say, I just became very, very involved in other organizations, things that didn't revolve around sports, but I was well-rounded. So all my eggs weren't in the lacrosse basket. They were well-rounded, other things to fall back on.
Sure.
Very pivotal in my story in life. When I get disappointed in life or things are going really good and then I get thrown a curveball, I'm able to be well-rounded and I have something else to fall back on. And that's a current theme in my life. And I think that's very important to mention now that I'm talking to you. I didn't even realize this until I just But I really feel that if we put all of our energies into one part of our lives, even just spiritual, mental, emotional, physical, like if we just work so hard on like working out, if we're working on our, physical and we're not taking care of our spiritual, things are going, you don't have anything to fall back on when
For
things
sure.
don't go your way.
Yeah.
So anyway, so I was recruited for field hockey and lacrosse by Ivy League schools. I did get a scholarship academic to Lehigh University. It's a hidden Ivy League in Pennsylvania, Bethlehem, Pennsylvania. And I went to college and I was there for 4 years. And originally I was pre-med in journalism. And then my freshman year, it was kind of interesting. I joined a sorority, Delta Gamma. And that's sorority life is awesome. It's not even just the stereotypical like party, rah-rah fraternities. We did a lot with community service and a lot of fundraisers and organizations and what have you, and also going to the fraternity parties and drinking. So it was a big goal. So anyway, I got involved. I started the rugby team. That's still a club sport now to this day, like 25 years later and plus. So I ended up playing a club and not wearing my knee brace and kind of risking it. Luckily, I didn't get hurt in the knee. And I played that year round, kept me out of trouble, kept me involved. And I loved it. And who wouldn't like a sport at the time? Like you could beat each other up on the field and with a rugby ball. And I was scrum half. So it's kind of like the quarterback of the team. And then you get to party with them afterwards. So that was kind of cool in college. I don't recommend that now, but it was really fun in college. And then graduated from college. It actually took me that summer after graduation for me to complete my degree. Because I could walk with my class, but I had a few classes that I had to take in order to graduate. My junior year, I wasn't doing so well in college. I was behavioral neuroscience, a big biopsychology, and journalism. And I was failing all my classes, which was very hard to deal with. I just wasn't in the right major. Lehigh is a very big engineering and business school. With a lot of work in chem and engineers that were like knocking off all the classes, and really wasn't where my passion lied. So basically my junior year, I was year round, summer sessions, winter sessions, and fall and spring sessions. And I completed, I think, 60 credits out of 125 needed in 1 year.
Whoa.
And I really buckled down. I lived off campus, so I didn't have that much responsibility with the sorority. I worked as a waitress all through college on weekends to pay my way because I didn't have parents in my life to help me with that. So really, it's a blessing and a curse. I was able to do what I wanted, when I wanted, whatever I wanted. And I had to be my own parent and, counselor, parent, teacher. So that was kind of, hard, I guess. But like I said, I overcame it. I'm an overcomer, resilient. So I graduate with a BA in psychology and a BA in journalism with a minor in science writing. And I was working as a counselor for Kids Peace in Pennsylvania. And then I decided California dreaming. I wanted to come to California. I was 23 years old. I had just graduated from college and I was dating this man, which when you don't have a very good relationship with your father or any kind of male figures growing up in life, we tend to choose men that are just like our fathers. It's either just like your father or nothing like your father. Unfortunately for me, I always liked the bad boys and that weren't very healthy for me, that kind of got in the way of me achieving. I got emotionally involved and what have you in multiple relationships, like long-term relationships, monogamous. But at the same time, it kind of shifted my focus from overachieving to investing time into a relationship. Anyway, came out to California.
Well, just to pause real quick, if that's okay. Yeah. So, because just to highlight, like at this point in your life, like you have a double major from an Ivy League school, you're a decorated athlete, you're like popular sorority girl, quarterback of the rugby team for, just for I know that's not the position, but like, you're like a leader on the team and like, most people would probably look at you from the outside and be like, wow, Laura is just killing it. Like this is killing it in life. But obviously, like you're saying, there's some things from that, like relationships from that family dynamics that are still carrying with you that are kind of leading into these negative relationships that are starting to show some signs of trouble. Thankfully, you're a very resilient person, and so you're able to overcome even some of those setbacks in the time. But like, yeah, just to like a little reset, because I'm following along with the story. Okay, so you come to California. Did you come to San Diego or did you come somewhere else?
No, San Diego. So
Okay.
I 6 weeks cross country. I'm in a beat up old red and blue pickup truck with all my worldly possessions in the back with the tarp cover. And we traveled for 6 weeks cross country. Amazing experience. My family really was me against coming out here, aunts and uncles and what have you. And even my aunt's like, you can't bring your car. I said, well, I don't need my car. Here you go. Here are the keys. I'm out. Right. So, and then my friend's father always said, he's like, Laura, just go for the experience. You never want to be sitting later in life and wondering what would have happened if I had gone out there following a dream. Also it was good. He's like, you can always come back, which is true. I go back for vacations and spend time with family, but I never really went back after 5 years or almost 30 years in California. But yeah, so it was more or less like moved to San Diego, cross country travels for 6 weeks, amazing. Get planted in, actually it was, at first it was Imperial Beach. So I was working in Imperial Beach, working in Coronado at a place called Costa Azul. I'm waitressing. Then I moved to Pacific Beach. And I started working for a publishing company. It's a printing company. Became executive assistant there. Things are going good. Ended up breaking up with the boyfriend, and he was getting involved in drugs and alcohol and weed and all this other stuff that I wasn't down with at the time. And so I stopped partying with them. And I just really focus on working. I'm all in. Like, it depends. Like, if I'm in a relationship, I'm all in. If I'm in work, I'm all in. If I'm in recovery, I'm all in. It's like I'm always all in for Jesus too. I'm like always all in. I'm either all out, depending on the. But I get distractions along the way. But then I started working in a publishing company, and I have a servant heart, but I also am attracted to people that are going through uncomfortable situations, family deaths. It seems like a big pattern in my life. When somebody's going through, a boyfriend is going through something, then I am there for them as support, and then we end up dating, and then it turns into a whole long-term thing. So I'm at Padre Printers and Publishers. I met my daughter's dad. His mom was suffering from cancer, pancreatic cancer that metastasized, breast cancer, what have you. So I was really there for him. I had broken up with my boyfriend for some few reasons. And so, yeah, we were even on Change of Heart, which I'll have to send you that link, my ex-boyfriend and I. So you can actually see a video of what I was like when I was 20 years old, out to California dreaming. But that turned into like a little bit of not dreaming. So I met my daughter's dad, never married him, together 9 years, got pregnant with my daughter, probably about a year into our relationship. And he's 11 years older than me. I'm still good friends with him today for the sake of my daughter. And we are good friends with co-parenting or the co-relationship with parenting of my daughter. So I just became all in. I was pregnant with my daughter. She was my dream come true. If you ask my aunt, she would say all that I really wanted was to have a family of my own, to have a family, kids of my own that I loved. They loved me, a supportive husband. And I really didn't get that. It was more or less, had a very much single lifestyle with my daughter's dad. We lived together. But I became a single mom working from home. We were like two ships passing the night. He was in sales. He'd go out at night for dinners and drinks with the sales guys, and then weekends it was always a football game or what have you, out the bars drinking. And then it was like 2005, and we had a lot go on that year that neither one of us could emotionally handle. It was pivotal to the point of where I did become a single mom that following like 6 months later. But 2005, we had, oh, by the way, I tore my ACL or my shoulder when I was in rugby, but I let it go for 7 years. So I had, in 2005, I had to have reconstructive shoulder surgery from rugby. So I had that surgery in April. My mother-in-law, my daughter's dad's mother, we called her Mama. She passed away in February. Then I had shoulder surgery in April. I'm working now in business. I'm an executive assistant at Nextel for 3 years. Very reputable. My daughter's in kindergarten and preschools and kindergarten and what have you. And then my aunt had an aneurysm, her third brain aneurysm that erupted. She's totally fine today. But it was a very scary time for me. We thought we were really going to lose her. And then it was my birthday. I gave myself a deadline, and I just kind of knew after that year. And then my daughter's dad's, I called it, he's basically my brother-in-law. He passed away in October. So a lot of things went on that whole year, a lot of deaths. My daughter's dad started drinking a lot, out of the bars, moving away from me. And I was carrying the load of, mother, working mom, supporting my daughter, taking care of everything with her school, involved with the PTO. It was just a lot to handle.
Yeah.
And we had definitely we were like two ships passing the night. So I decided to leave him. So it was my birthday, September 30th of 2006. And I finally left my daughter's dad. And now, mind you, Chris, I'm like 31 at the time. And I am 3,000 miles away from family.
Right.
My mother's still in a mental institution, which is very hard. I didn't have a mom to call and say, hey, I'm a single mom and I can't handle it. Like, what do you do? I'm freaking out because I'm alone, 3,000 miles away from any help.
Right.
And I have no emotional support. I'm working at Nextel, have a good reputation, but I'm embarrassed to tell people that I can't handle being a single mom, trying to get my daughter to school. She was getting sick a lot of infections and a few other things going on with her medically. And it was just a really rough time, honestly, Pastor Chris. And I started, I couldn't sleep. I was so stressed out that I was so worried about everything, how I was going to pay my rent. My rent was like $1,600 a month in my own 1-bedroom apartment, how I was going to give food for my daughter and not having a break. She didn't go to her dad's. She went to her dad's on Mondays and Tuesdays during school and work. I had no weekends off for years. And I really burned myself out to the point of I couldn't sleep. And I went to the ER, the emergency room in San Diego, Scripps Mercy, and they put me on Klonopin, which is a benzo. And they no longer prescribe this in doctors' offices because it's highly, highly addictive. And so I went there and they're like, hey, why don't we give you like some Klonopin and you'll be fine. And they gave me some Klonopin and I was fine, but I was addicted. Right.
Yeah.
And it was, I had an addictive personality. When I was in college, I drank alcohol, but not to excess for the most part. But when I got out of college, I could go and have a glass of wine or a margarita and it was fine. It didn't lead into, other things. But when I got put on that Klonopin, it's like a Valium or a Xanax, but times 10. And it relieved my anxiety, but I was addicted and I had to have it. Like, you felt like when I was withdrawing without medical help, and doctors weren't prescribing it to me either. So I started going overseas and the doctors are like, the psychiatrist here is like, no, we're not giving it to you. It's very addictive, very addictive. You can't be on it for long term because it's not healthy. And also, you're probably suffering from depression, situational anxiety. Either go home to Pennsylvania where you have support. But I believed in the father-daughter bond. So my daughter is very close to her dad. So I didn't want to take her away from her dad. So I just I got on this whole Klonopin. I had to have it. And it became like Monty always talks about, my husband Monty always says like the phenomenon, craving of the phenomenon or phenomenon of the craving. But that's really when my addiction really set in.
Mm.
And I started getting it overseas. So for maybe 7 years, it was a vicious cycle of me getting my prescription Klonopin overseas. Some of the shipments would get confiscated. Never got into any legal trouble, thankfully, because I sent it to a P.O. box, so I was kind of smart there. But my daughter had to see me go from successful single mom, PTO mom, to a mom addicted to Klonopin. And then when I couldn't get my Klonopin shipments sometimes, there was like a month where I couldn't get them, then I'd turn to hard alcohol. And that's the only thing. Hard alcohol and I never agreed. And beer, wine used to be fine, but I stayed away on purpose from shots and hard alcohol. But that's all that I could do to help me with like coming down. You feel like you're losing your mind. I mean, I don't know if your audience, if anybody's been on this drug, but it honestly, when you come off, you could have a heart attack. You could have like a stroke. If you don't have a medical detox from it. And I did this over and over and over again. It's like that whole saying, like the insanity, keep doing the same thing over and over again and expect different results.
Were you just trying to quit on your own, or were you like, was it just because the shipments didn't come in, or where were you at with that?
I quit on my own. Honestly, Chris, when you're in that cycle and I wasn't working and I had sold my car to pay my rent because I was too embarrassed to tell my family I wasn't making it out here. I quit my job at Nextel through the merger of Sprint because I couldn't handle taking my daughter to school and working full time and traveling to Irvine. I just couldn't do it. So I took a sales job that I was terrible at. I hated sales, so anxious. And then I couldn't find a job. For many years, I could not find a job. So after a while, I got so discouraged, I gave up. I sold my car, so I have no way of getting around. And I basically shut myself into my house for like 3 years. Honestly, Pastor Chris, for 3 years of my life, I barely went out. I was scared to take my trash out to my dumpster. I would go out at night, and I was so embarrassed about the alcohol that I started like in my kitchen. It became like a mountain of alcohol bottles. And I keep looking back, I never lost hope in my life, but I lost hope. And it was like dark. I shut the shades and my daughter had to witness this. And she had to see me. It wasn't like I was always
how old was she?
She was, it got really bad when she went into sixth grade because she was at an elementary school by where we lived in Little Italy. But then my single mom group, we dispersed because all of our kids were going to different middle schools. Because here in California, it's something different than Pennsylvania, but we have choice out schools. So in Pennsylvania, you have to go public schools. You have to go to that school that's in your zip code. California, you can choose whatever, as long as parents provide transportation. You can go to any school you choose. So my daughter went to a school over in Pacific Beach, and all my friends were in La Mesa, and like my social support, my emotional support of single mom friends with daughters themselves.
They kind of
scattered, and I had nobody, and that's when I sold my car to pay my rent. It turned into a whole big thing. Downward spiral. Honestly, Pastor Chris, it is downward spiral.
Which again, like knowing you, and like you said, like we've known each other for a long time, and living water folks that have been around long enough, like you are not an introverted person. You know what I mean? Like you are someone who likes to be out there, kind of social butterfly. And so to imagine you like pent up in your house, like you must have been really struggling pretty hard with some things and really feeling a lot of shame and all of that. So how did you end up losing your place?
Well, actually, whole long story. It's when I finally got into some recovery, I kind of pulled the plug on my own housing and became homeless by choice in some ways. So it gets kind of convoluted. So anyway, so my Philippines Igloo RX, no longer in business, goes out of business. No longer getting my Klonopin from Philippines. Everybody else is a scam. That I had tried and found out everybody's a scam. So they closed the Roush plant. It was like Roush Pharmaceuticals, and they closed the plant. This is April 1st of 2000 and maybe 12, I think.
Okay.
And 2012 or 2013. So I got sober cold turkey, and on April 1st of that year, got rid of the alcohol immediately. My daughter got her mom back. I cleared out. I put on Craigslist like, "Hey, come pick up all my beer bottles that I've been storing up for years." They all came. They're like, "Oh, this is amazing! That you're turning your life around." They invited me to AA meetings. I went to a few AA meetings, but it's kind of cliquey. The few meetings that I went to, I just didn't really find my groove or my people that I could do. So I didn't really stick with that. So I was just sober, but I had no job. I was in my apartment. I was like going and hanging out at the coffee shop, not drinking anymore, which is great, but I had nothing else. I was doing nothing else. Again, if you put all your eggs in one basket and other areas of your life aren't working, it's all going to collapse on you.
Right.
No, I wasn't on Klonopin. I was getting my life together, like mentally. I was with it, and I was working physically, but my spiritual and emotional well-being really wasn't being. It was just the symptoms wasn't being treated, I guess.
Yeah.
So for a few months, I just didn't know what to do with myself. But at least I was going out. I was walking every day. I was going into Little Italy. I was going on the buses, learning the bus systems of San Diego. So I was getting out there. And it gave my daughter hope that she was getting her mom back. I started watching kids again. And my daughter's friends would come over, and I'd take them out everywhere, and started renting a car. I rented a car like just per month. So like things were getting good again, right? So again, another 3-year lapse of going into deep despair. But then I came out again, and it's kind of like falling into the deep end of a pool and or jumping off a cliff and coming up from air. And you're like, oh, I can breathe again. Oh, this is what it's like to breathe. I can't believe I was underwater for so long. And then it's like, okay, well, I don't really know how to do anything but doggy paddle, right? I don't know how to swim really. I'm sitting there floating around. So I ended up, so I was going through a very big depression. I didn't know what to do with my life. I wasn't relying on drugs and alcohol. It's like that fog had lifted for like 6 months. So I remember on my birthday again, I went up to the ER and I said, I'm really depressed. Like I am really depressed. I don't know what's going on with I just have like empty. It was like kind of like an empty shell. I said, I need help. And so they actually put me in a crisis house for the first time. San Diego is wonderful with the resources for the most part, because there's nowhere after are you familiar with what crisis houses are, Chris?
I am, but maybe say for those who aren't. Yeah.
So, and this is kind of pivotal in my homeless story too, the resources of San Diego that Pastor Chris, you and I had discussed earlier. Like you said, I use all of them. So I give like a Yelp rating on each one, and all of them get at least a 4-star, because there's a lot of resources in San Diego that I hope other cities do model, because really we have it going on in San Diego for programs. The only thing about the homelessness is there's programs for when you're in crisis, but there's nowhere to go after the crisis is over.
Right.
So no long-term solutions. So you go to the crisis house for about 2 weeks. There's like 4 in San Diego. They're like renovated houses. And at each house, and they're really houses, there's like mental health counselors, psychiatrists. So they help you get on medication if you're having some mental issues. It's a community living, so you have chores and everybody gets their, a room or shared with a roommate. You get food, you get fed, you you get your doctor's appointments out of the way. You can go to if you're looking into rehabs, I go to church. But it's really only 10 days, 2 weeks is the limit. And then they just put you back on the street again without any real kind of rehabilitation, like a new way of life. So you go to doing what you know, and then it turns into another cycle.
And what happens to your daughter when you're at a crisis
Well,
house?
I went to the first crisis house. They put me on Zoloft, which I do not recommend. I did have an adverse reaction to Zoloft. And so I was diagnosed with bipolar, but I was diagnosed when I was like coming off of Klonopin. So it was, I do believe there's a spectrum of bipolar. You're functional bipolar. I don't like to lead by the stigma of bipolar, and I don't feel bipolar. But there is a stigma, and I say this lightly. I didn't want to be turned into my mom. That's like always a fear in my life. So when I did get the diagnosis of bipolar, and once you get diagnosed, it's very hard to get away from the diagnosis. But mine was a drug related diagnosis coming off of Klonopin and alcohol. But needless to say, so I'm off. It's September 30th of 2013. And so I went to the crisis house, and my daughter's dad did watch my daughter. He knew I was not well, but he couldn't do anything really about it, didn't try intervention and what have you. So I went there, and it was like a breath of fresh air. Like, I'm not alone. There's resources. Anyway, so I got put on Zoloft, and it's an antidepressant. You should never take that without a mood stabilizer if you are bipolar. And so I'm not drinking, not on Klonopin, don't have any life or any kind of spiritual thing. I was like up at night and sleeping during the day. It was just a very bad lifestyle. And so anyway, so I it was like October 22nd of 2013. My daughter's in seventh grade, I think. Seventh grade. And I don't know what happened that night, but I taken my Zoloft, and sometimes Zoloft and Effexor, which comes into play later, not with me, but with my cousin that committed suicide. It can cause suicidal ideations. So I do not recommend getting on any new medication without any kind of like accountability partner or somebody that can help you oversee.
Watch out for you.
Yeah. Throw you on a medication, a psych medication, and just throw you back in your apartment. Like I said, no programs to go after that. And you could be dead in there if nobody checks on you. Right. That's what happened to me. And I got prescribed from the doctors on this Zoloft, and I had an adverse reaction, and it was, I almost committed suicide in front of my daughter. So that was like really tough. Yeah. And, and I couldn't blame it on alcohol, and I couldn't blame it on drugs because that wasn't it. I did the best that I could do with my daughter at the time. Do still hold on to like a lot of guilt, but I kind of lost my whole world.
Yeah.
So like, if you hear my story, even when I was homeless and I met you, I didn't really talk about my daughter a whole lot. I was like ashamed, and I really love my daughter, and I've worked very hard to, mend the relationship in God's timing. But at that time I lost everything. Like my whole world like collided, and my daughter went to go live with her dad. And that night she called her dad, and he came and picked her up. And then I went into San Diego County psychiatric there, and again they treated me, and they put me on a bipolar med, mood stabilizer, and then sent me home again. And so my daughter's now really mad at me. She was always strong-willed, but now she's like, I'm going to live with my dad. I had 85% custody of her. How could you do this to me? And it was very uncomfortable. I go visit her on Thursdays at her dad's, now supervised. And this is 2013. I finally, in 2024, finally had my first lunch with my daughter without her dad's supervision. So It really took me 10 years of really working on my relationship with my daughter. But there is hope out there for anybody, because my daughter swore she would never talk to me again. She's 13, 14, doesn't want to talk to me. And then the following year, about 6 months later, and I went through a deep, dark depression, couldn't even get out of bed. but I'm not drinking, no alcohol, but I had nothing. And then I go to Pacific Beach and I met up with friends and I found methamphetamine. I always said it saved my life. I'm so grateful that I did find meth because it got me out of my room. Hold on one second. And it got me out of my dark place. But my counselor later told me, he said, Laura, you didn't get your life back. He's like, you got a life back, but not your life back.
That's right. Yeah.
But then I was on methamphetamine for about 2 years. I found friends in Pacific Beach. It was fun. I had that joy back in my heart. It felt good. I was partying. I was making friends. It was, great at first, and then turned into not so great again after the addiction kicks in. Right. So then I met my ex-boyfriend. I'm an Uber driver. I've now joined the Uber X leasing program. So I'm driving around a new Prius and getting myself together on meth. And I was functional for a while, and then it turned into not so much. So my ex-boyfriend, again, another ride or die, bad boy, drug dealer, and it was on. So for like 2 years, my daughter's lived with her dad ever since this incident on 2013. Now I'm just not present for her in her high school years. Like she's in 8th grade, 9th grade, 10th grade, 11th grade. I'm not there. And I became homeless. And my first day of being homeless was October 30th of 2016. So from like 2014 to like 2016, I'm on meth. I'm off and on, going up to Orange County, relapsing where my boyfriend lived at the time, not working really other than occasional Uber drives, just on meth, partying. Yeah. And with other people. And so it was a whole big thing, but.
Yeah, well, and we met you not long after that, I think, or maybe even right around then.
And yeah, you met me. I started using meth. It was like February 22nd of 2015. And then me a year later in 2016 when I became.
And like, I guess what I'm noticing as I listen to your story is, first of all, how all these different experiences, they just like compound one another, you know what I mean? And they lead to one another. So, getting it was a physical injury that leads to some mental issues, and then you get a prescription that's addictive, and that leads you to further deepening addiction, and that leads to broken relationships, and you can just see how like everything kind of like folds in on each other. And like when you're telling your story and like discovering meth is like a life-saving thing, you know what I mean? Like you're like, oh yeah, something is wrong here, because like how bad must it have been that like getting into meth was like actually like a step up in the world, you know what I mean? Because it's we know meth pretty well in our context, and it's interesting because meth was huge back then in our neighborhood. Now it's all fentanyl, so it's kind of like people still use meth, but it's just like I don't know, it's interesting how the waves come. But you can just see how like everything kind of rolls in on each other. And then you like have this broken relationship with your daughter, which is super depressing and leads you further into like the pit. And, and all of this, like we didn't know any of this. Like we met you and you're like this bubble of joy, knew you were using, it's just like you seemed like probably using meth, but didn't, like you said, you didn't mention your daughter for a lot of years. I think it was like several years before I knew you even had a daughter. And she's like the huge, like maybe the biggest piece of your life, but there's so much like shame and all the things around it that you got to keep this part of yourself hidden. I guess what I'm just trying to highlight for people that are kind of unfamiliar with like this, just homelessness and addiction in this world, is like how complicated things are and how much is going on underneath the surface. Because everybody that we meet in our church that's on the street, everybody's story is different, obviously, but everybody has been through something, you know what I mean? And everybody has like more going on than you think. I wouldn't have guessed. I knew you're smart and could tell you're probably like an achiever type person, but like wouldn't have guessed you had an Ivy League degree. You know what I mean? Like there's so many things beneath the surface that that people are just guarded about it. And so if you only have like a surface level relationship with somebody on the street, they're only going to show you a little bit of themselves, and they're only going to show you what they want to show you. And that's self-protection. Like if they're not being necessarily being manipulative or something, that's just like because they're ashamed. We all do this. We all kind of guard what we share with others. And when it's so difficult to unpack all of the things that you've been through, it's got to feel overwhelming to try to open that up for somebody else also. All right. So you're using meth, you're on the street, you're coming through, like a more of an opioid type addiction before that. And where do you, are we there yet? Like, where do you start to find some help in getting clean and sober for real,
Homeless. So like you said, Chris, thank you for actively listening and just kind of repeating back to me. And it really is, it's refreshing for me to get a summary of when you're going through things firsthand, you forget about the outsider's perspective that sees things that you can't. Even in the rooms of recovery, it's like, you all loved me at Living Water Nazarene Church when I couldn't love myself. It's the same thing with this podcast recording. It's just really refreshing hearing it from you, because we do have a friendship, and you are, you have counseled me in the past, and pastoral care too. And so it's really nice to come to terms, now that I'm on the other side. And it's just super refreshing. But my first day being homeless, so it's October 30th of 2016. I'm still on meth. I've been on meth for a year. It's kind of a binger. I could like put it down for a while, and then I would basically, my pattern or my cycle would be, I'd use meth, and then I'd go up to Orange County, come back to San Diego, get sober for 3 months, and then I'd be missing my boyfriend and go back up there again. I couldn't find a job. The one key part is I could never find a job. And I honestly felt that if there was a program that was offered to me, like the Out Project Wheels of Change, I was on the news for that. Really, when I was given a job, like, I don't feel that my life would have gotten so out of control, because I would have had accountability. If things were going with me, other people would know and call me out on it. So there's that loving kindness that I've always felt from others, no matter what. But it's first day, and I had come off. I was up and stranded in Orange County. My boyfriend just dropped me off the Amtrak. No money, no food, on meth. So I camped out there for 3 days in the woods of Amtrak of Irvine, and I came out and I was hungry. So I'm not high. I'm super skinny though. I haven't eaten for 3 days. And I remember getting a cardboard box and writing on the cardboard box, because I was so embarrassed to like ask somebody for a train ticket to San Diego or food. I was hungry. I was really hungry. So I said, I need food. Can somebody please buy me a sandwich? And there was a vending machine. So I'm not asking for money. I'm literally just I want a sandwich out of the vending. And I like a one-way ticket to San Diego so I can get out of here, right? And now I had already been in a crisis house, so I know there's help in San Diego if I could just get myself to San Diego. So this gentleman, they always say about entertaining angels. This was like my entertaining. He was like an angel in disguise. I truly felt that he was like a young guy, maybe in his 20s, a tech guy working for a .com. And he came up to me and he said, "Are you hungry?" And I said, "Yes." And he's like, "I read your sign." He's like, "Let me buy you something to eat." So he bought me a sandwich and one of those round table things. And then he said, he heard my story and he's like, "Wow, this is an insane story." Again, he saw something in me, and I wasn't high and I wasn't drunk, and I was detox, right? So he bought me a one-way ticket back to San Diego, and I had a paper ID, and they didn't want to let me on the Amtrak train, and it was a whole thing. And then the conductor's like, "Well, it's your lucky day. I'm giving you a one-way ticket back to San Diego. Don't come back." But he said it lovingly, like he saw the good in me. And I took the Amtrak train, got back to San Diego that night, and it's raining. All I have is one bag over my shoulder, like a vest, a white vest, shorts that were like white, and like a coral sweatshirt, shoes, and maybe like a few things in my bag. And I'm tired. I'm like, where do I go? My aunt had, I tried a few rehabs in this convoluted story. So I still had my place. And when I was like, I left crash to go back out and use drugs. My aunt was packing up my apartment. I said, I cannot go back to that house. Just like the abuse of my stepmother's house was very similar to this house. It was just filled with years of bad memories. And I said, I can't go back there. And my aunt's like, well, we're not buying you another house. My family was supporting me at the time, and they were paying for my house for many, many years. So I said, and it was like a tiny, like half house. It wasn't like a house. It was like a side house, like a granny flat with like one bedroom in it and a kitchen and a dining room. But anyway, so I said, no, I'm not going back there. So my aunt's like, well, then you're going to be homeless and my aunt did not want me to be homeless, nor did my grandmother. This is a Lehigh college educated 2-degree girl who got her own scholarship and people to believe in her. And now she's like a drug addict, hanging out with the wrong group of kids or people, adults, hanging out with a bad guy, and I'm on drugs. And she's like, my aunt's like, if you leave that, we're not paying for your house. And I said, well, I'm not going back there, so get rid of it. And they took, my daughter's dad was very supportive at the time. He ended up turning into a great dad. When my daughter went to go live with him when she was 13, he dropped everything. He stopped drinking. He like focused all on her. To this day, he still focused all on her. He never got involved in any other relationships, and he really is a really good father to my daughter. And they're super close. I'm super grateful that he was there. No CPS was involved. It was, I still had like 10% custody, so she could still get my Medi-Cal insurance, which comes into play later because I didn't get general relief or any money when I was homeless because I still had 10% custody. So in a way, I chose my daughter's medical insurance over me getting general relief money. But I'm getting a little ahead of myself. So first day, just come off the Amtrak train, and I'm down by like, where the like Embarcadero is? Down on it's basically the port of San Diego, along the water by Seaport Village. And I wind my way up to like Little Italy, and I'm right outside of that one building, and it's raining and I don't know where to go. So I literally was so tired that I just, I put my head down. I just laid on the ground. Like I just stood there and I laid on the ground, and it was like a little shaded area kind of. And I fell asleep. And that night, it's my pizza story. And I love telling the story, and I don't tell it enough. But, Felipe's Pizza, that's really good in downtown San Diego. And when you're homeless, like you do look for food that people like. Usually the people leave like half portions of stuff of their food on top of trash cans. So the homeless people can eat the food. And I was one person that always would eat the food. And that was left not really dumpster diving, but pretty close to it. Right. And this pizza story, I had, so I just rested my head down. I put my like jacket over my head, and I just fell asleep. And I woke up sometime in the middle of the night, and there was this full cheese Felipe's Pizza there on the ground for me to eat. Somebody, who knows who, little another angel, thought enough to leave me a pizza. And I was so hungry to devour that. And I was just like thinking, I said, I'm going to be all right. And God was in my life, and Jesus was in my life at the time. And Jesus, I had this feeling that came over me at that time that was almost like an embrace from Jesus and God, that basically I knew I was going to be okay. That other people, as long as I didn't isolate myself in my house, that'd be okay. And so I chose that night to be homeless because I still had my house until the next day. My November 1st or the 31st was Halloween. Like 2 days later, my house was being closed up. And I could have called my aunt and begged and said, I can't be homeless. Like, how am I going to survive as a homeless person? But I didn't. I said, I'm not going back to that house. It's too much bad energy and too much nightmare life. And I wasn't going back. And I didn't. I chose to become homeless that night. And so I woke up the next morning. It's Halloween. They're in. So I get up and I hear these homeless people talking about Terminator, right? Sarah Connor. And when I was in my addiction, I thought I was Sarah Connor at some point. So they're talking Terminator and I went up to them. I said, where do you go if you're homeless? Like I literally asked somebody on the streets talking about Terminator. I didn't ask for drugs. I said, where do you go to get food? And they're like, that way. So they pointed down to like where you are at 15th and Market, right there with the island intersection. And I just started walking that way. And it was Halloween day. And all the kids homeless were walking around in like their Halloween costumes, which was really sad. My first night in a shelter was 2 steps down. It was God's extended hand. It was right there on Island, I think 16th and Island. Yep. Very bad location for someone, especially like myself. But I was a venture and I was going to do this homeless thing and I was going to overdo this homeless thing. And I was going to conquer the world and I was going to get sober and I was going to get my daughter back and everything was going to happen overnight. And so if I could just get shelter for tonight. And so I walk over to God's extended hand and they were giving out a dinner. And so I asked, I said, where can I find shelter for the night? Well, the first night I actually was underneath the bridge and these people just started handing out food, like this church community, just regular people, like a group of people started handing out sandwiches and they put candy in the bags and and then I found my way to God's extended hand and ate there. So they're no longer open, but it was really the only shelter in San Diego that didn't have a 30-day minimum or curfew. If you didn't make curfew at like the Out Project, you were kicked out.
Right.
Rescue mission, you had to be there 30 days. And if you missed a night, you're kicked out. You lost your spot. But at God's extended hand, it was just come as you are. If you need a place to sleep, women and children, no men, but if you need a place to sleep, go line up outside of God's extended hand at, 7 or 8, and then they will let you in. Being a single lady, sometimes I said the inn wasn't open. Sometimes, and they had Mother Mary and Jesus on Christmas decoration. The lighted nativity scene, the plastic nativity scene. They even had Mother Mary and baby Jesus. My first day being homeless, I was on Halloween looking up there, and I'm like, okay, this is where Jesus stayed, right? And heartwarming. And it was raining again, and we're standing in line, and all these kids are lined up at the. It was heartbreaking. The kids are crying. They're like, luckily, nice people in the community were handing out candy, and it was so sad to be in that place. And you walk in and you sleep on a cot, and the floors are dirty, and there's dripping in the bathrooms, and it was a place.
God's extended hand was an interesting place because, like you said, it was this oddly accessible place that people could just go to, and there would be a roof at least, but a lot of bad stuff happened there. Like, I don't even know if you know, but the building isn't even there anymore. It's been razed to the ground after people kept setting it on fire over and over again after it closed down. But anyway, we could talk a lot about God's extended hand and just kind of the warning that it is, but also the beauty that it is that isn't there anymore, because there's no ultimate place that catches people now. Like everything is like a much more over-organized program. I don't know if that's the right way to say it, but like everything, you have to get waiting room, you have to go through the systems, you have to do curfew, you have all these rules and all these kinds of things. And God's Extended Hand was just like this little Wild West type place that was super dangerous. Like I would almost didn't recommend people go there. I remember Will used to call it God's extended finger instead of God's extended hand. But it did serve this really odd role in the community that was like significant. Anyway, I'll
So,
not go off on God's
but
extended hand.
the thing also, we were talking about resources later on, like where do people go if you're home experiencing homelessness, right? And where do you go? But there's a process for getting into the homeless shelters.
Right.
So like government. So if you're lucky to get a bed at the Out Project or any other shelters, you want to keep your bed. And what I liked about God's Extended Hand that's not there now that it's been closed down, there's no program in San Diego, which I would like to see again, something safer facilities that are clean, but one that's just a come as you are. If you want to stay the night, great, line up at the door and come in, spend the night, and then go on your way. So if you choose to not go back for one night, you're not losing your bed. You can come there again. Right.
And that's kind of how our inclement weather shelter works. It's just that we're only open on certain nights and stuff. Yeah.
Amen. Exactly. And it's a great program. I would like to see more shelters that didn't have the, specifications of staying at, I don't know how to better
all the barriers and all the rules and everything. Like it really is. I don't think people who aren't familiar with the shelter system realize how difficult it is for people. Like I know people who have had to choose between their job and their shelter because their job, they didn't get off until after curfew, and they had to decide if they want to keep their job or if they want to sleep in their shelter bed or lose their shelter and all the work they've done in the program. And so they either quit their job or they left the shelter, and either way, it's a lose-lose, and those things are in place for reasons because the organizations have to be able to like function, and they want to keep people safe, and they want to see people progress over time and not just drop in and out. But it also, that works when people are in a certain place in their journey, but in a lot of other places, it's really doesn't really help very much. All right, so we've shared a lot of your backstory, and I really, it's really helpful, I think, to hear how somebody gets to kind of where you got. I'm going to get kicked out of the library before too long here because I got a limitation on the room, but also want to make sure that that people are able to tune in long enough to hear kind of the redemption side of your story. So, you utilize, like you said, all kinds of different organizations and programs, including Living Water and Voices of Our City Choir, which at the time was really closely connected to Living Water. And they're still friends and stuff, but they've moved to a different location. But tell me a little bit about all right, so you're trying to get clean and sober. You've had this up and down journey with that. Where do you find sort of redemption? How does that come?
Well, I think, Pastor Chris, it comes through a lot of different things, but it's like you said, in and out. I went in and out of like 6 rehabs until I finally graduated from a program, the Salvation Army Adult Rehabilitation Center. Really, it was a work therapy program, and I had discussed before I couldn't find a job. So I ended up giving up. And then actually it was kind of interesting because my last day that I was homeless, and like you said, when I was homeless, I was going to AA meetings. There was a downtown AA meeting in the same building as Living Water. I was going to Voice Our City Choir on Friday. I was community living. But there's a news article, and I don't know exactly what happened, other than it was God. It was God showing his light through me. And he just said clearly, enough is enough. All or nothing, Laura. I remember distinctly thinking all or nothing. You're going to get sober for your daughter and for you, or you're going to go down this other path. And So I went to, it was Living Water Nazarene. Your church was having an NA meeting on a Thursday. It was called the Open Market. I helped name the Open Market or whatever Thursday AA NA meeting. It was actually NA, and I was secretary. And I again was sober for most of the summer at the Alpha Project. Um, and then my ex boyfriend moved into the Alpha Project with me, which was kind of interesting. I ended up relapsing. I go to the Living Water Nazarene Church probably about 2 weeks before I finally got sober. I went through crash 3 times. I never graduated. I went through like house metamorphosis. Nothing was really working. Behavior modification. The seeds were planted, but um, for whatever reason, I couldn't get more than 3 months sober, and then I'd just go and relapse. And then I'd show up again, and here I am surfacing again. I was known to like disappear for a while, even from the church, and then
Yep.
there's Laura out on the streets again, and being that governor that she was, even labeled me like governor, because I come and I knew everybody, and I was the best dressed homeless person ever because there was no laundry facilities to do my laundry other than like Neil Good Day Center, which people are washing their clothes in the sink, and that was not a good place to hang out if you were not using drugs. Not safe at all for a single female. Needless to say, I would just go to Rachel's day shelter, get coffee, some lunch, and fellowship, and clothes out of the boutique. Right, Out Project, same thing. So I was always switching up my clothes, and but finally it was I had I don't know if you remember, Pastor Chris, but I had a seizure outside of Living Water. Now,
yeah. Yeah.
coming out, and I had just relapsed on meth again, and I was coming out of the NA meeting, and I had a full on seizure out front of Living Water Nazarene, where I hit the ground hard with my head. Luckily, no damage, no concussion or anything. Luckily, I came to in the ambulance and what have you, but I was getting scared. I was like, oh no, like this is a meth induced seizure. And then so I kept using, and we had this great smoke out and whatever. And every time I'm like, okay, I'm gonna done. And then I could put it away, like I said, for 3 months, and then I go back to it. It was insane. But this time I was at the Alpha Project. I was Wheels of Change. The Alpha Project had a work program. So you sign up and you could go out and pick out trash in the San Diego community, and they would pay you $46 cash.
Right.
And it was wonderful. It was I coined it cash for trash, and there's still news articles. The last day that I use is captured on video, and I sent it to you, Pastor Chris, a little snippet. Actually, I haven't sent you the news article. I sent you some other things filmed that day. But finally I was working. I was working, and there was hope. Like I said, I couldn't find a job, and the Wheels of Change. There were so many. There was like 300 people in that. And they only had like 10 spots. So it was like maybe once a month, and it was lottery if my name got called, if I can go work. It wasn't like a daily thing.
Mm-hmm.
But it gave me my dignity back. And again, I became like the poster child of Wheels of Change on the news and what have you. But the day in particular was October 3rd of 2018. And they filmed me on the news, and I was picking up hypodermic needles on the ground. So, well, I had used that morning, and that was the last time. I never used after this newscast. Never used again. And for a few reasons. I don't know whether it's I finally got a job. God had sent me the signal like you're either all in or you're all out. An awakening. They always say, you have a spiritual awakening. But anyway, so that afternoon it was so I woke up the next day, and I didn't use, I don't know. Basically, it was the next day on October 4th, we were having an NA meeting. I'm secretary, and I get called out by one of the members at Living Water Nazarene Church. They called me out. They said, no, you can't be secretary because you're high, and you relapse. And I did take a newcomership. And so I got up, and my friend Mario, who was helping me pick up trash, and he believed in me, and we walk out of Living Water Nazarene Church, and I'm like, we're going to go back to I don't need these negative people. I'm going to go to my first NA meeting I ever went to. It's called Narcotics. I don't know, Victorious Narcotics or Notorious Narcotics. And it was at the other building on down by St. Vincent de Paul. I forget what the name of that building was. Anyway, so I went there and we're walking there, and my friend Mario, who's also filmed, he said, you need to get off the drugs, Laura. And he's like, you have too much going for you and whatever. He said something, and then he held like a USA flag patch, and he's like, don't do it for me, or you do it for your country, or something like like that, right? And that all kind of stayed with me. I always was able to see the humor. I think how I've been able to get through everything is really finding the humor in some of the stuff. I mean, if you don't cry, I would much rather laugh than cry. And sometimes it helps you go through bad things when you can actually look back and you're like, yeah, that wasn't really a good decision, or that was kind of a crazy story. But at least it's my story, right?
Right.
Story. But anyway, so that day I never touched drugs again. I left the Alpha Project. I left the guy. I started going to the God's Extended Hand, sober. I went to meetings in your building of Living Water Nazarene Church next door. There was a downtown AA meeting. I was going every day to an AA, every afternoon to an NA. I have pivotal people in my life that are in the recovery community that I'm still friends with today. They said, I'm trying to get into a rehab. And they basically said that my boyfriend at the time was like a weight, like an anchor. And I needed to cut the anchor and sail ship and go to a rehab. Anyways, a whole long story. I became homeless.
Was true.
Yeah, it was true. But I was like, no, I had this great idea. I'm like, oh, I'll be 30 days sober, and then I'm going to bicycle around the world.
I was going to ask you about this because I was like, you had this crazy idea and you were dead set on it. You got a bike, you had a helmet, and you were going to like bike across the country and maybe like around the world. And we were just like, all right. But you were so set, like we weren't going to be able to talk you out of it. You know what I mean? We're like, Laura, I don't think this is going to work. But then we're afraid you'd just be like, well, then forget you. You don't believe in me. I'm going to go do it on my own anyway. So we're trying to be like supportive. Tell me about the bike around the world thing really quick. Cause again, we're going a little long here, but tell me what happened with that?
Okay. So I'm 30 days sober, and from drugs, alcohol, meth, Klonopin, everything. I quit smoking for about 2 years after this. So I quit everything. Pastor Chris, I quit even caffeine for the first month that I was sober, because I associated cigarettes with the caffeine coffee. So I like cold turkeyed everything. I just got off. And so then I was like, I need to get out of California. I need to get out of San Diego. I need an adventure. And I always had my bike. I San Diego, and that's part of my my testimony, always having a bike. Steph Johnson bought me a bike, and her husband from founders of Living Water Voices Our City Choir. So she was pivotal too in my my getting out of the cycle of homelessness. But anyway, I had a bike always with the lights and the bell and the basket. I had it all going on. I had so many bikes. Needless to say, my whole thing was I was going to go to NA meetings everywhere in the US by bike. And I was going to recycle in every town and buy a postcard for my daughter. I asked my daughter, can I leave? Because I was talking to her at the time, and she gave me her blessing that I could go on this bike round. They thought it would be good for me to get out of town for a while and start a life, right? Without all the triggers. So I said goodbye to all of you. I said, and I'm sober at the time too. So it's like,
I know,
like high off a rocker. And then I'm at the Alpha Project, and they're like, they're going to eat you alive out there. They're going to eat you alive. I was like, oh, I'll be fine. And if I can survive on the streets for 2 years by myself as a single female, like I can pretty much survive anything. And at one point, my ex was like, we're at the L Project. He's like, you're making homeless sound cool. Laura, it's not cool. Because I attitude. So anyway, so I was like, okay, I'm done with all this. I'm sober. I'm going to go to any meetings, AA meetings, all around the states, and I'm going to go cross country by bike. And I was going to stay at all the shelters and use all the food resources and whatever. And I never really went hungry in San Diego. Those 2 years I was homeless, like there was always some place where I knew I could get food. And but I'm also living in San Diego has a lot of resources going on. I'm not like Pennsylvania blizzard or anything, right? So needless to say, I'm like, okay, I'm done. I'm saying goodbye. Usually I just disappear, but this time I said goodbye.
Mm-hmm.
I got on my bike and I have no money on me at all. Don't get general relief for years, have no money. And I hop a train with my bike on the coaster up to Oceanside. I hop on a Metrolink and I make it to Santa Ana. Now I had been homeless Santa Ana before, and right outside of Irvine. So I stay there for like a week and I'm chilling there, and whole long story. So I decided I'm going to cut my hair off, right? So I got the Sinead O'Connor playing over the radio, like nothing compares to you. And I chop up all my hair, got a whole buzz cut. I was chopping all the drugs out of my hair and whatever. So that was kind of pivotal, kind of crazy. And then I made it to Skid Row. So I made it to Skid Row, and everybody in Santa Ana thought it was so cool that I was like on this adventure, and I was so like, I had a plan, and I was sober, and I was at meetings, and I'm recycling, and everything's great. Get to LA, Skid Row. It's actually funny. Going in, somebody's like, you need to sightsee. Have you ever seen like the top of this like building with the view around? So I show up with my bike, and I have my crowbar, whatever, for my bike. And so I pull up to like this huge building, and they have a beautiful sky deck on the very top floor in a museum. And I started talking to whoever, the guard, and they're like, oh yeah, we'll put your bike in this back room. And I went up there and I had a great time sightseeing, like I'm a tourist. Right? And then I'm like, where's Skid Row? And they're like, oh my gosh, this girl is like looking to be homeless on Skid Row. And I had so much fun, Pastor Chris. It was so fun, but they don't have any recycling. So there was no way I could send my daughter a postcard. And it got real old. I joined the women's centers are very pivotal, very important. Anyway, it's like Thanksgiving, and I'm staying at the midnight mission, and people are handing things out on the streets, and I get really sick. I don't know if it was food poisoning or whatever, but I was really sick. And I remember like calling my family, and I got off the phone and I was like, I think I need to go to rehab. I don't need, I was already sober. I started rehab when I was 56 days sober. So almost 2 months sober. So I was like, yeah, maybe this isn't a good ride. Oh, and they stole my bike. I went into an AA meeting on Skid Row outside the Midnight Mission, and they stole my bike. So I said, I have no recycling, no money, no bike, no way to get a new bike. Don't know anybody on Skid Row. So I was like, I think it's time for me to go. And so I went back to San Diego, and then I called up the Salvation Army, the Adult Rehabilitation Center.
We were very relieved to see you, by the way, because I was like, she might die out there. I don't know what's going to happen, but we're very happy to see you back. Okay, so then you got the Salvation Army.
Yep. And then just kind of speed it up. So I'll kind of speed it up for you. So I went to the Salvation Army. It's a 6-month free rehab program. It's a work therapy program. So I worked in the warehouse during the day. I went to meetings, had support groups, met a lot of the women in the program who were just like me, surrendered to God, became a leader, became a daughter of the King, and which is basically an usher, an adherent for the church, leadership position, and was really there for the women in the Salvation Army, other alcoholics trying to get recovery. Didn't talk to any of the guys. They do have a role in like no fraternization, which is talking to guys or girls, and then no stealing, called pilfering. So weird terms. Anyway, did that for like 6 months. Was all speed ahead. Decided I'm giving up on the men scene right now. They're not healthy. And I had a bad picker. They call it like a relationship picker. Like I have a bad it's broken. So I let it stay broken and I just focus on, and then I started coming back after the program and I graduated from the ARC. I'm living at the Bridge House Salvation Army Door of Hope in Claremont. It's called Reentry. So I lived there, sober living for 18 months. I started working at the thrift store in Point Loma, Salvation Army thrift store. So I'm working again, which is a key component to getting out of the homelessness.
Mhm.
I basically just go to AA meetings, NA meetings. I get a job at the Live and Let Live Alana Club up in Hillcrest that is now shut down. Found my, people that I could relate to in the rooms. I was the all through COVID. We would like open and shut down the club, but I still worked even though it was COVID. Even though the center was closed, we were like working on like rules of reopening and the distance and how that was going to look for AA meetings, like the 6 feet apart. And we had a sound system, Zoom, and all that stuff. Then I would donate my time, volunteer at Living Water Nazarene Church all through COVID, handing out meals during the day on my bike, on my bike. And then things were going good, 18 months sober. My daughter, I am talking to my daughter every day, every week. I've called her 6.5 years every Sunday, talk about her since basically like day 56 of the Salvation Army. I've been doing that. And now I'm like day 2000 and something. So I was very, but my daughter really, I didn't see her for a year and a half all through COVID because her dad was battling cancer. She was in a nursing program for a CNA with the lockdown, everything else. So I didn't see her for a year and a half. We've never Zoomed. Never Skyped in all these years. It was always by phone. And so I would see her like after COVID and liftoff. I see my daughter like 4 times a year.
Mm-hmm.
But it's the quality of time and it's the weekly calls that have really mended the relationship. And like I said, it took about 5 years for me to really get the trust of my daughter again.
Mm-hmm.
And so the fear that I'm not just going to walk out and relapse and walk out of her life again. So she really started trusting me, and now it's a beautiful relationship. We talk about 2 hours every Sunday, and we both really enjoy the conversations. It's a beautiful, healthy relationship that God has mended. But it took some time, God's timing, not my own. So about 2 years sober, I started working for a rehab, an outpatient private pay insurance called Refresh. Also, parent company La Jolla Recovery, became house manager for the women's residence there. Met my husband, Monty, actually through the Salvation Army. He graduated from San Bernardino, came down to San Diego when he was 18 months sober. And I'm 2 years sober. And he starts living in the men's residence at the Salvation Army, working as assistant manager for the men. And we meet up because I'm still going to chapel and church at the Salvation Army as a graduate and alumni. We meet, we date. Eventually, we get married. We saw you for marriage counseling. So now now I have a husband. He's a really good guy. Finally, really took 2 years not dating, not even talking, not to anybody. And then Monty kind of showed up in my life, a very good person and very supportive of me. Then we went back to the Salvation Army because we wanted to be officers of the Salvation Army. So we kind of pulled away from all of you at Living Water Nazarene Church because we really were we were living in Claremont in our own apartment. We were working crazy business hours. I was starting to take class at City College again for alcohol and drug counseling. I was just a lot. And so we went back to the Salvation Army. We started volunteering our time there, working with the kids programs and just being present. And then God just put on our hearts for the calling to be Salvation Army officers. And here we are now. We've been married for 3.5 years. I'm 6.5 years sober. Have my daughter in my life who's in a nursing program, and I'm very proud of her. So things are good. I've worked very hard to discipline myself, be obedient in my calling, be there for others. And it's just very interesting. And I'll just kind of end on this. When I was homeless in San Diego, there was I was being served, by the different organizations and for clothing and for food and for resources and shelter where I could lay my head. Once I got sober and had developed a life, I was able to give back in the same rooms of recovery, the same churches that served me. I was able to give back to them and help other homeless people, even if it's just to listen to their stories, to give them like a bottle of water and say, everything's going to be okay. I've been there too.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. And I would say even along the way, even while you were actively on the street and even in and out of sobriety, like you were still using or not using, you were still helping and volunteering and being a part of the community. And I think like those experiences, like participating in the ministry, is part of what builds your confidence and builds your your sense of dignity and allows you to make meaningful relationships with people that aren't just transactional. I'm just here to get a water or whatever, but like I'm here because I'm part of it, And I think, I don't know, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but I feel like all of those experiences were a really important part of you kind of finding yourself again and getting back in the right track. And then you've kind of poured your life into like giving back to others, serving God, serving others through the Salvation Army now. And it's just been a great journey to watch. So grateful for all that God has done in your life and all the work that you've done on yourself and in your own life and in your relationships to get to where you are now. It's just like a joy to see you, and to see you guys, both you and Monty, to just see you guys like just doing so well and not doing so well even just for your own sake, but so that you can serve others. It's beautiful. It's come full circle, like you said.
Amen.
Yeah, anywhere we've gone a little long here, but that's okay. Any closing thoughts? Anything? I mean, maybe that was it that you want to leave with people, is that like you now all the things that served you while you were on the street, now you're able to participate in giving back and serving the next generation of Lauras who are out there struggling through life. Any closing thoughts?
Really being open to reaching out to others. If you're really having a difficult time in your life, whatever that may look like, to not stay isolated, because it's a lot easier to hold in the guilt and not be humble and not be vulnerable, because you don't want others to know that you're not doing good, whether that's emotionally or mentally or physically. Sometimes I know I put on a facade, or I used to put on a facade that everything's okay, but it's okay to say I'm not okay. And I think my story with isolation, once I was able to be around community, and that's really what a church is about. It's not really about anything else but being there together in a community, taking others as far as you come yourself. So my biggest takeaway is, if you're having a difficult time with processing anything, to not wait to reach out to somebody, whether that's a friend or even a hotline number. Just pick up that phone or call that friend or call that pastor or call somebody that you can trust. Go to an AA meeting, even if you're not part of addiction. We're all addicted to something, but it's a community of people. So you can say, hey, I'm having a difficult time. Can somebody give me a resource? Can somebody help me out? As opposed to keeping it all in. Because I know once I keep everything in, it's like anger turned inward will turn into a snowball effect, as we've just gone down my whole life story. It's the worst times in my life when I gave up hope was when I was alone, when I was trapped in my own despair, my own head, when I sold my car to pay my rent. So I have no way to get out there, be with people. And I just sat in my house for like 3 years doing God only knows what, on drugs, because I was so filled with shame. There's also a lot, give ourselves a break. I think there were certain times that I was so filled with remorse and guilt, that it's almost like I took a lot of anti-shame and a lot of anti-guilt classes when I was in rehabs. And there's a whole big thing. Brene Brown has a whole thing on it, on your mental health when you hold on to shame and guilt. And I think that's a big part of recovering from anything, from homelessness, from any life's downs. It's really let go of the shame and letting people help you. I think just being real with people and being transparent today. I try to be authentic in everything that I do. I try to be transparent. And my new word of 2025 is intentional. I'm intentional when I love others and I make others feel valued and important in my life. It's very intentional. Like when I get set out to do something, it's like I have a plan and I'm very intentional about it. So if I was like going to rehab, then I'd be like very intentional about me getting to the interviews. Or if I was trying to find housing, if I was homeless, I'm very intentional about making sure I'm at wherever I need to be for those resources. So it's just being intentional, being our authentic self, and just letting go and letting God. I mean, that's really like you said, I had to do some of the work. God just didn't, magically make my life better overnight. These things took years, and it's finding fellowship in other people, being part of a community, something greater than yourself, finding, in the rooms of recovery, it's finding I found God, and that's just what I did. I found God, I followed Jesus, and my biggest goal in life, honestly, Pastor Chris, is if I can help one person in my life get through a difficult time, then I will be successful in life. And I really feel that with my story, there's more than one person that I've helped in my journey.
Absolutely.
So, and you can only take others as far as you come yourself. So eventually I'd like to be more of a leader or, inspirational talker or something to give back to these organizations. Right now, I'm so busy with officer training college and getting my ordained minister, seminary school, all that stuff, that I can't really give back on a board or something, but becoming involved again, the hands and feet of these organizations that I feel really met me where I'm at. You don't have to be like, even just going to church, you don't have to dress up and be in fancy clothes to go to church. Just come as you are. And I know that's like really cliche, but nobody cares. Like you said, we just wanted you to show up again when I'm on my world bike tour, right? And I'm not high. You're not like, well, I wish you would get off of drugs. I'm off of drugs. Like, oh, I wish. They're like, what are you doing? But I had so much enthusiasm and I had so much like goals. This is what I was going to do. Nobody's going to talk out of me. So you're just like, okay, like there she goes again. But it's really just staying connected to your community, and it's working with others, and again, not keeping everything inside.
Yeah. I'm getting the hook over here from the librarian, but absolutely. Well, you're doing all those things right now. Thank you for sharing a little bit of your time with us, Laura, and many blessings on the next part of your journey. I hope I know we will. We'll stay in touch and keep being part of the story, and God's using you. So keep it up. All right.
Love you.
Thanks for your time. We love you too, Laura, and we'll see you later.